When a rescue helicopter reached the Dyatlov Pass in February 1959, it became clear that the 9 missing hikers had been dead for weeks. As search teams began investigating the tragedy, they immediately realized that this was not an ordinary incident. The tent had been cut open from the inside with a knife. However, there were no signs of a struggle or physical confrontation. A short distance away, the bodies of 2 hikers were found completely naked. Further ahead, other hikers were discovered with fractured skulls. One of them was missing an eye or a tongue. Even more strangely, extremely high levels of radiation were detected on the bodies of some of the hikers. The teams were apparently unable to make sense of what had happened because the case was officially closed as a death caused by natural conditions, and no further investigation was pursued. Yet the mystery of this incident has continued to capture people's attention for more than 60 years. To this day, there are those who claim it was a military cover-up, a KGB operation, a creature attack, or even an alien encounter. So what really happened at the Dyatlov Pass? And looking back today, what do we actually know about this event? Let's take a closer look. Before examining the hidden side of the story, let's briefly summarize what happened for those who are not familiar with the details of this highly famous case. In the freezing cold of February 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers set out from what is now Yekaterinburg, then called Sverdlovsk, planning a 16-day expedition in the northern Ural Mountains. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a highly disciplined and cautious individual. His team consisted of engineering students, athletes, and experienced outdoor hikers. Only one member, Yuri Yudin, turned back due to health problems and survived. The remaining 9 would lose their lives on the slopes of a mountain called Kholat Syakhl. The group was last seen on January 31st as they left a village and headed north. Their goal was to reach Mount Otorten. However, due to severe blizzards and harsh weather conditions, they deviated from their route and ended up heading toward Kholat Syakhl. In the language of the local Mansi people, this mountain was known as Dead Mountain. Ironically, it was here that their fate would be sealed. Days passed without any news from the group. When they failed to return by the planned date, a search and rescue operation was launched on February 20th. First, fellow students joined the search, followed later by the military. Finally, on February 26th, rescuers found the tent. It was covered in snow and partially collapsed. Upon closer inspection, it became clear that the tent had not been opened through its zippered entrance, but had instead been slashed open from the inside with a knife. Inside, shoes, coats, food, and personal belongings were neatly arranged. This indicated that the hikers had fled the tent in a hurry, only partially dressed. The first 2 bodies were found about 1.5 kilometers away, near the edge of the forest, beneath a pine tree. They were wearing only underwear, and their bare feet were embedded in the snow. It was as if they had fled from something but were unable to return to retrieve their clothing. Nearby, 3 more bodies were found lying face down in the snow. Based on their positions, it appeared they were trying to make their way back to the tent. The remaining 4 bodies were discovered months later, when the snow melted in spring. This is where the real mystery began. One victim's ribcage had completely collapsed. Another had a fractured skull. What was striking, however, was that these injuries appeared to have been caused by pressure equivalent to a car crash. Yet there were no external wounds, cuts, or bruises on the bodies. One of the female hikers was missing her tongue and eyes. Even more disturbing, high levels of radiation were detected on some of the bodies, something virtually impossible to encounter during a normal hiking expedition. The soldiers and officials involved in the search were baffled by these anomalies, yet the official reports listed hypothermia and harsh natural conditions as the cause of death. The case was closed. After seeing all this, one unavoidable question remains. What could be behind these mysterious findings? Over the years, countless theories have emerged, each pointing in a different direction. One theory suggests that this was not a simple natural disaster, but part of a secret military or nuclear experiment. The entire Dyatlov group consisted of students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. At the time, this was not an ordinary engineering school. It was an institution closely connected to the Soviet Union's strategic projects, particularly in nuclear technology and military research. In other words, these young people were not merely adventurous hikers. They were potential engineers for some of the most critical scientific projects of the era. The high radiation levels found on the bodies strengthened the belief of those who argued that this could not have been a coincidence. At this point, the incident began to shift from a tragic mountain accident to the possibility of a covered-up state secret. Some researchers also pointed out rumors that several members of the group had connections to the KGB. For example, Anna, Matt, and Yeva were mentioned in this context. In the book Dyatlov Pass, The Mystery Lives On, claims are made that some of the hikers may have worked for the KGB or at least carried out certain tasks under the guise of being students. Similarly, Donnie Eichar's book Dead Mountain discusses the possibility that some members of the group had links to the KGB. One notable figure was 38-year-old Semyon Zolotaryov, the most experienced hiker in the group. He joined the expedition at the last minute, almost by coincidence. He had a military background, had fought on the front lines during World War II, and was nearly 15 years older than the other students. Why he joined the trip so suddenly remains a subject of debate. Some believe Zolotaryov was assigned as a KGB observer, while others argue he was simply recruited because the group needed an experienced mountaineer. Regardless, his last-minute inclusion later became one of the strongest foundations for espionage and secret operation theories. According to some, this expedition was not merely a hike, but part of a covert mission. Some claimed the group was supposed to meet another team transporting nuclear materials. Others suggested they were meant to make contact with Western spies and were silenced when things went wrong. The absence of the hikers' cameras further fueled these suspicions. Another widely discussed theory is that the incident occurred during a military test. The late 1950s were a period of intense nuclear and ballistic missile testing by the Soviet Union, and the remote regions of the Ural Mountains were ideal locations for such experiments. According to some witnesses, bright orange spheres were seen in the sky on the night of the incident. Unofficial reports also suggested that military drills and rocket tests were being conducted in the area around the same time. This raised the possibility that the hikers had unknowingly found themselves in the middle of a secret test. The evidence seemed to support this idea. High radiation levels, severe internal injuries consistent with blast pressure, and the absence of gunshot wounds or shrapnel. The tent being cut open from the inside suggested sudden panic in response to an immediate threat. According to this theory, the Soviet military realized the test had caused civilian casualties and covered it up by labeling the incident as a natural accident. The fact that KGB files remained classified for decades only strengthened these claims. The reports of glowing orange spheres also gave rise to more fantastical theories. Some locals claimed to have seen unusual lights in the sky, which eventually led to speculation about an alien encounter. Some researchers suggested the hikers had come across an unknown aircraft and fled the tent in terror. The strange injuries and radiation were linked to this narrative. However, there is little concrete evidence to support this theory, making the alien attack hypothesis one of the most talked about yet least credible explanations. In reality, understanding what happened that night does not require extreme conspiracy theories. When several human errors and natural factors combine, the picture becomes much clearer. Most likely, the Dyatlov group pitched their tent on an exposed slope despite the blizzard, probably to avoid losing their route. This small mistake left them vulnerable. Throughout the night, strong winds caused snow to accumulate on the tent. As the pressure increased, a small but deadly slab avalanche occurred. The tent partially collapsed, several people were seriously injured, and panic ensued. Instead of using the entrance, they cut their way out of the tent and fled into the storm. For many years, this theory was dismissed due to the lack of visible avalanche traces. However, recent research has changed that perspective. In 2019, Swiss scientists Johann Gaume and Alexander Puzrin used computer simulations to demonstrate that a delayed slab avalanche could indeed have slid onto the tent hours after it was set up. Such avalanches can leave no visible traces after a short time, explaining why rescuers found no signs weeks later. Field studies conducted in 2011 showed that the slope angle ranged between 28 and 30 degrees, conditions suitable for slab avalanches, making the theory entirely plausible. The internal injuries described in autopsy reports, collapsed rib cages and skull fractures without external wounds, are consistent with such pressure. The storm was so severe that the hikers did not even stop to grab their clothing or boots. They headed toward the forest, but injuries and extreme cold caused the group to split apart. Some tried to start a fire beneath a large pine tree and froze to death. Others collapsed while attempting to return to the tent. The four who moved further downhill tried to dig a shelter beneath the snow, but their injuries and hypothermia ultimately claimed their lives. The fact that some bodies were found unclothed is not mysterious either. In advanced hypothermia, a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing occurs. Victims lose their ability to perceive cold and feel as if they are overheating, causing them to remove their clothes. This explains why some were found wearing only underwear. The missing eyes and tongue were most likely the result of natural processes. Bodies left under snow for months can be affected by animals and flowing water. As for the radiation, it is not as strange as it seems. These were engineering students, some of whom worked in laboratories. Radioactive contamination on clothing prior to the expedition could easily have influenced the measurements. As for the orange light seen in the sky, while witness accounts exist, it is far more reasonable to attribute them to military tests or atmospheric phenomena. When viewed as a whole, this tragedy appears to be a chain reaction of unfortunate but explainable events. A tent pitched in the wrong location, a small yet deadly snowslide, panic-driven decisions, brutal cold, powerful winds, and hypothermia. The Dyatlov Pass incident was not the result of a mysterious creature or an alien attack. It was a tragic combination of human error and the merciless power of nature. What happened that night is still chilling, but it also serves as a reminder. Nature is humanity's greatest test, and sometimes even the smallest mistake can lead to consequences so severe that they are remembered as an unsolved mystery for generations. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. See you again on our next journey.